Buy your bread, fresh bread, today's bread, sweet bread. You see, in this life, when a child born with a silver spoon decides to throw the spoon away and chooses to start tasting mud, it should note that it will get everything dirt from the mud it sought and may never have the privilege of using the silver spoon again, even if he later desires it, because he opened his eyes and clearly shows death for himself. Once upon a time, in a not so big town in Enugu, there lived a 17-year-old boy named Chike. Chike was born into a comfortable home, but he decided to become rebellious. Instead of focusing on school, he dressed roughly, sagged his trousers, and walked about carelessly. Chike's change started when his parents refused to send him abroad. Many of his school friends and classmates had gone overseas for studies, and he wanted the same. When his parents said no, anger filled his heart. He made up his mind to disgrace himself and his parents just to get back at them. That was how we started moving with Obi, Emeka, Michael, and Tochukwu. Boys everyone in the neighborhood already feared. They didn't care for school. Their lives were filled with smoking, gambling, and stealing from market women. Their base was an abandoned, uncompleted building down the streets. Obi was the talkative one, always forming leader among them. Emeka liked showing off strength and was quick to start fight. Michael was quiet but full of tricks. Tochukwu was the boldest, never afraid to do dangerous things. Together, they welcomed Chike into their group because they saw he was eager to join in their ways. At first, they mocked him for being a rich man's son. Chike himself was not used to such a life, but the more time he spent with them, the more he copied their ways. Soon, he proved himself by following them in their petty crimes. He smoked when they smoked, wore rough clothes like them, and stopped caring about how people looked at him. He spent more time in the uncompleted building with them than in his father's house. That building was always their base, a building where empty cement bags and broken bottles littered the floor. They would sit there for hours, laughing, smoking, or planning mischief. People passing by kept away because everyone knew those boys had nothing good to offer. Chike stopped spending time at home. When his mother asked him to stay for breakfast, he would ignore her. When his father asked about school, he gave careless answers. His mind was only on meeting his new friends. His parents noticed the change but did not know how deep it had gone. They saw the sagging trousers, the rough hair, the smell of smoke on his shirts. Unfortunately, his father ignored him, believing that it was only a minor act of rebellion and that he would change back. His mother begged him, but Chike had already made up his mind and he was sinking deep into his new lifestyle. One afternoon, while the boys sat inside the uncompleted building, they heard the call of a bread hawker. A girl's voice rang from the streets outside. "Fresh bread! Buy your fresh bread," the hawker said. While Chike sank deeper into his new life, thinking he was privileged, another person was working very hard on the same streets of Enugu. Her name was Amara. She was only 16, yet she carried the burden of helping her family survive. Every morning, she balanced a tray of bread on her head and walked the streets, calling for people to buy bread. "Buy your bread, fresh bread, today's bread, sweet bread," her voice rang out as she went from streets to streets. Her clothes were plain, but her spirit was strong. She moved from one area to another until evening. Every loaf she sold brought money her parents depended on for kerosene, food, and other little needs of the family. It was through this work that her paths crossed with the boys. While Amara was focused on selling enough bread to meet her family's needs, the boys' eyes followed her. The boys were lounging at the uncompleted site, wasting the day, when they noticed her. She noticed them too, but kept moving because she had seen them there many times and knew their kind. Chike sat with the boys that day, laughing and pretending to be one of them as usual. He did not know that his decision to rebel against his parents would soon drag him into something far darker than petty crime. So, that afternoon, as Amara upped her bread, Michael whistled and laughed. "Look at that girl. Let's call her. I want bread," he said. Obi's eyes shone with mischief. "Yes, let's call her," he responded. They moved toward the open front of the building, waving and calling out to the girl. "Hey, you girl, bread, come here. Bring bread for us," they said. Amara turned her head. She saw the group calling her, but hesitated. The uncompleted building was not a place she liked to go near, especially knowing the boys who gathered there. But her tray was still heavy on that day and money had to be made. She walked forward, balancing the tray of bread on her head. "How much is your bread?" Obi asked, stepping forward with a grin when she got there. 200 naira for the small ones, 400 naira for the big ones, Amara replied with a steady voice, even though within her, she couldn't wait to sell faster to them and leave the area. She began to lower her tray, ready to make a sale. She lowered her tray carefully and stood at the mouth of the uncompleted building. The boys crowded close. "Give me the big one," Obi said. Amara brought out a loaf and held it firmly. 400 naira, she repeated. Obi laughed instead of paying. "Wait, don't rush. Let me see the other ones first." Emeka stepped nearer also. "Yes, open the wrapper of the other ones. Let's check which one is fresh," he said. Amara frowned. "I don't open bread like that. If you want, you buy," she said, shifting her tray slightly as though to leave. But the boys blocked her path. Tochiku leaned against the wall, arms crossed, smiling. Michael circled behind her quietly. Chike, though, stood a step back, watching. His heart pounded. He had followed them many times in mischief, but the way they surrounded the girl this time around made him uneasy. Still, he stayed, trying to look tough still. Amara noticed the way they moved and instantly knew they were not serious about buying bread. She tried to turn away. "I am going," she said, raising the tray again to her head. "No, wait," Obi snapped, his voice now sharp. "Why are you rushing? Do you think we don't have money?" He pulled at the edge of the tree. Amara yanked it back from his hands, her face now sharp with anger. "Leave my bread alone," she yelled. Emeka gave a mocking laugh. Michael shifted close behind her. Tochukwu bent and picked a stick from the ground, tapping it lightly on his palm as he smiled. Amara's chest rose and fell fast. She bent slightly, snatched a smaller stick from the ground and raised it. "Look, if you touch me, I will beat you people with this stick," she said, scared. For a moment, the boys were surprised at her boldness. She swung the stick again, once in warning. The bread shifted on the tray in her hands, almost spilling. Chike was now scared. Emeka moved closer and she struck his hand immediately. He shouted in pain. That single strike broke the balance. Tochukwu, the always angry one, rushed forward. With the heavy stick in his hand, he swung it hard at Amara. The blow landed on Amara's head. She gave a short, sharp cry and collapsed to the ground, her tray tumbling, the loaves of bread scattering on the dusty ground. Silence followed. The boy stared at Amara, lying still. Obi's chewing gum fell from his mouth. Michael opened his lips but said nothing. Emeka rubbed his arm, shocked. Chike dropped his own stick immediately. His hand shook. "You've killed her," he said with panic, and though his voice was a whisper, everyone heard. Nobody answered for a while. They only stared at Amara lying still, blood starting to stain from her hair. Obi finally bent and touched her arm, then quickly pulled back. "She's gone," he said. Michael stepped backward. "What do we do now?" he asked. Chike muttered, "Maybe we should call someone for help. She may still be alive if we take her to the hospital very fast." Emeka's eyes darted to Chike. No way. If people hear, we are finished. So no, we can't do that." Toshiko dropped his stick and wiped the sweat off from his forehead. "We cannot leave her here. We have to act very fast," he said. For some time, the boys argued in low voices. Some said they should run, others said they would be caught. In the end, Obi raised his voice above others. "We must hide her." They all turned to Chike, who still stood, trembling and saying nothing. Obi looked at him and said, "Look, you are a part of this. If you say anything, we will all go down together." By nightfall, the 5 boys carried Amara's body wrapped in a dirty clothes. They avoided the main road, sneaking into a bush path. The darkness pressed around them, their breaths heavy as they dug non-stop with sticks, their bare hands, and with an old rusty shovel they had picked from the uncompleted building. When the shallow grave was ready, they laid Amara's lifeless body inside and threw the scattered bread loaves too into the grave. All of it. They covered both her body and the bread with soil, pressing it flat with their feet. Their hands dirty, their faces pale. No one spoke as they all returned back home. That night, Chike lay in his bed, wide awake. He could see Amara's face in his mind, hear the sound of the stick, and the thud as she hit the ground. He turned side to side but could not sleep. From that day, he stopped following the boys as before. He avoided the uncompleted building. But what he did not know was that what had happened there would not go unpunished. It started one Saturday morning. Chike's mother had set the dining table for breakfast. She placed a fresh loaf of bread in the middle beside butter and tea. Chike's father sat down, adjusting his glasses as he reached for a slice. Chike also sat quietly across from them, though his appetite had gone ever since the night of the burial of Amara's body at the bush. As his father cut into the loaf, a dark red liquid spilled out from the loaf. It spread across the tray, soaking the bread like palm oil, but thicker, heavier. Chike's mother dropped her spoon in shock. "Jesus," she cried. "What is this? Is this blood?" The bread dripped, staining the white tablecloths. Chike's father pushed his chair backward, trembling. Nobody touched the food again. They cleared the table and threw the loaves away. But the next day, when another loaf of bread was brought home, the same thing happened. Chike stared at it with wide eyes, his heart racing. His parents whispered that something was wrong with the bakery they were buying bread from. "Maybe that bakery is cursed," they said. So they bought bread from another shop. Still, when they cut it open, blood poured out from the bread again. In another part of town, Obi's family also faced horror. Obi's mother set pap on the table with bread for dinner. As she tore a portion of the bread, the soft inside turned red in her hand. Blood oozed between her fingers, dripping into the pap. She screamed and flung it away. "Chineke, what is this?" she shouted. Obi froze, unable to answer. His younger siblings wailed, running out of the house. The following week, same thing happened. From then on, nobody in the house ever touched bread again. At Emeka's house, it was worse. His mother owned a small shop where she sold provisions, including bread. That week, as customers came to buy bread loaves from her, the bread would start bleeding in their hands and they would throw it away and run away. Word spread quickly. People stopped buying things from her shop. Emeka's mother was confused. She sat on a stool outside, holding her head in her hands, crying over the loss of her only source of income. Emeka, what is happening? Why is this only happening from my shop? Why are bread bleeding? This is strange, she asked and cried in despair. Emeka had no answer. He only stood there sweating, remembering the shallow grave in the bush. At Michael's home, where he had lived with his father and younger sister, bread would just suddenly appear in their living room, even though nobody bought it. One morning, they woke up to find a loaf sitting on their old wooden table. His sister tried to touch it, but then it burst open, blood running down to the floor. She screamed, crying in fear. Michael's father threw the bread outside, but another loaf of bread appeared the next day with the same bleeding, and even the day after and the days after. Toshuku's house was small, yet it carried the loudest cry. One evening, his mother entered the kitchen and found 3 loaves of bread on the floor. Nobody had bought them. She bent to lift one up to know why a bread was there, and it burst, splashing blood across her wrapper and her fingers. She screamed and fled outside. Meanwhile, Chike's parents could not endure the bleeding bread anymore. It had repeated itself so many times, and every attempt to avoid it failed. They bought bread from different sellers, from different shops, different bakeries, even from far away in different towns. Yet, the same thing happened. Bread bleeding. This was strange. Fear filled their house. At last, they ran to their church to see their pastor. Church that they had not even entered for 5 months. They were not devoted Christians, only the type that goes to church once or twice a month. But now, with the mystery of the bleeding bread, they had no other solution than to turn to God, because they know it is only God who can save them. When they got to the pastor's office, the pastor listened as they explained. He bowed his head and prayed for a while after they were done. Then he lifted his head when he was done praying and spoke firmly. This is not ordinary. The bread you see, I've been told through divine revelation that it is tied to blood. I see a young girl. She sold bread. She struggled against your son and his friends. Your son and his friends struck her down and buried her with her bread. Until they openly confess, her blood will continue to cry and you will continue to see bleeding bread. Chike's parents rushed home with the pastor after hearing the shocking revelation the pastor had discerned. They didn't waste time to ask Chike about the incidents. Chike broke down immediately. His lips trembled, his hands shook, and he admitted to the truth before his parents. He told them everything. From the day he joined Obi, Emeka, Michael, and Tochukwu, to the night Amara died and her body was buried. His parents listened in shock, unable to believe that their son had carried such a secret. When he finished, the pastor said to Chike and his parents, "You must confess to Amara's parents. Only then will peace return to your lives." The following day they began. They went first to Obi's family. Obi's mother received them. She stood and listened as Chike's father spoke plainly. "Our son has confessed. Your son was part of a terrible act. A girl was killed. Her body was buried with bread. That is why bread bleeds in our homes." Obi's mother shook her head widely. "Obi, what have you done?" she cried. From there, they went to Emeka's house. His mother, who had already lost her customers because of bleeding bread in her shop, stood outside her small kiosk when they arrived. She had thought they had come to buy, but when she heard the truth, she dropped to the ground in shock. "So this is the reason? My son, you've ruined us," she shouted. Emeka stood outside, sweating, unable to meet his mother's eyes. Michael's father was the next house they went to, a quiet man. He listened with folded arms as they explained. When Chike finished his confession, the man sighed deeply. "So, this is why bread appears in my house without end and bleeding. Michael, you have brought curse on this family. I said it, that you will someday. Hey God." The last visit was to Tochukwu's family. His mother sat on a low stool and was peeling tubers of cassava when they came. When she heard the truth, she screamed and flung the knife aside. Toshi, oh, Toshi, you've killed somebody's daughter, eh? Hey, this boy has finally finished me, she shouted. When all the families had heard, Chike's father gathered them together in his compound. All 5 boys sat on the ground, heads bowed, unable to look at one another. Their parents stood around them, some weeping, others silent in shame. This is hard, but we have no choice, or we will face more worse mysteries. The pastor said peace will only come by confession. We will have to go to the girl's parents, Chike's father said at last. The next day, they all went together to Amara's house. Her parents lived in a poor part of the town. Her mother was sitting at the doorway, her eyes looking so tired from many nights of crying. Her father was inside, silent. Since Amara's sudden disappearance, they had lived in sorrow, not knowing where their daughter had gone to. When the group arrived, the compound filled quickly. Neighbors gathered, sensing the weight of the visit. They knew something must be wrong for these people to come visit Amara's parents. The moment the group revealed why they were there, Amara's mother wailed and fell to the ground. Her father staggered out of the room, his face twisted in pain. Who killed my child? He demanded. Chike fell to his knees. The others followed slowly. Their voice cracked as they spoke. It was us. We lured her. She resisted. Toshuku struck her and then she died. It was a mistake. We didn't mean so. We buried her in the bush with her bread. Amara's mother's cry grew louder. She beat her chest and rolled on the ground. The father raised his hand towards the sky, trembling. My daughter, oh, my daughter, he cried. The police were called. Officers arrived, their boots loud against the heads. They listened to the confession again, then took the boys away in handcuffs. The parents of the boys cried in shame as the crowd watched. The case moved fast. The boys were charged, tried, and convicted. And though most of them weren't up to 18, except for Obi, who was 20, and Tochukwu, who was 19, 2 of which were just barely young adults, they all received long years in prison. Life behind bars for the boys was harsher than the harsh life they thought they knew on the streets. The cells were hot, the food poor, the days long. Obi no longer boasted. Emeka no longer laughed. Michael no longer planned tricks. Tochukwu no longer acted bold. And Chike, who had once rebelled to hurt his parents, now sat every day in regrets. They remembered Amara's face, her voice calling out, a tray of bread balanced on her head. They remembered her struggle, her fall, her silence. They remembered the soil covering her body, loaves thrown in after her body, and they remembered the bleeding loaves of bread. In prison, years passed. None of them ever saw freedom again. Their parents aged quickly as well, under shame. Their families carried the stain of the crime. And the boys, once eager to prove themselves as tough, ended as broken men. Bread no longer bled in their homes. The curse had been lifted, but the memory of blood stayed with the boys till their last day. Their wealth or poverty made no difference. Only regrets remained. The end.